Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for ThatShelf.com, and we're here to look at Joni Mitchell Blue on vinyl.
Mitchel.
Joni Mitchell's 1971 mega work. I don't know if it's a masterpiece, because almost every record that she did is a work of a master. It's pretty good, this Joni Mitchell kid. We're looking at a wide range of releases. This is a unique album timbrally. It sits right at that center point between her earlier folk, just her and a guitar, and building up the instrumentation that she was doing during this period. And then she would go on with Court and Spark to work with people like the LA Express, then get into major jazz, and then do all kinds of crazy instrumental stuff. So you have here her coming back from Greece using things like different instrumentation, bringing in slightly different augmented tunings, very subtle use of instrumentation. There's nothing really slamming here. It's all sort of sprinkled in and actually gives a real amazing and unique and definitive sound for this particular era. The records themselves have gone through a bunch of releases, many of them quite accomplished, and we are going to do this comparison directly to this guy. This is a brand new one step that I just opened while the other video was uploading. I was sitting here listening to it against my other three copies. I listened to the one step in its entirety, which I'll give a response to in a sec, but after I did that, I went back and I chose the song California because that one I think has the balance of all of it. It has her incredible tenor, soprano, whatever we want to call it, real subtle instrumentation that can either be brought up or down in the mix depending on who's mastering, a certain separation between the instrumentation, where she sits in the pocket, all the different aspects that sort of drive what that song's essentially sonic signature is. A bunch of other tracks had some things to highlight as I was sort of bouncing back and forth, but it was California that I used as my sort of exemplar. Plus, it's easy. It's the start of side 2 on the regular 33. Now, the first thing that we can look at is this guy. This is a little bit, as my records are falling, let's make sure they don't fall, that'd be bad. This guy, this is a first pressing US, I believe it's a US. It certainly looks beat up enough to be a first US. I will confirm that in the dead wax. That's certainly what I thought of when I was listening to it. This is indeed, yep, made in USA. So this is a made in USA first pressing on reprise, that sort of ugly reprise color. There was some water damage on the outside, but the record itself is pretty mint. Again, you see how the original was done this way, gatefold with the lyrics inside, a post-Sgt. Pepper record, we know that. And the record itself would have shown up in this guy, in a plain blue paper sleeve that's obviously been removed and replaced. It's pressed directly on card. It looks like a form of tip-on jacket, the way that it's folded on, but it's much less substantial than sort of modern tip-on jackets. But nonetheless, despite the water damage, it's a good sounding record. And hearing this, the first pressing, you could immediately hear, first of all, a lot more surface noise, of course. It's been cleaned multiple times through my degrader, but it is just noisier vinyl. Early 70s vinyl isn't particularly amazing. We weren't quite at oil crisis level, but we were certainly, they were pressing so many of these and they were cutting some corners. The vinyl itself wasn't particularly amazingly audiophilic. The record itself, her voice sounds slightly distant. The mix itself is a little bit further away, if that makes any sense. The instrumentation is there, but it certainly sounds like that her high end has been rolled off relatively significantly. She has a very, very cutting voice through a mix, and some of the tracks it can especially in some setups, it can be very, very harsh. The way that it actually is presented, if you're not careful. I have the speakers that I'm listening to, B&W 802 Diamonds, go up to 50K. So like I can hear that high, but nonetheless, if there's high frequency that is being reproduced, plus I'm using a moving coil, there's all kinds of things that I'm going to get a lot of that information out of the vinyl as much as I can. And sometimes on particular recordings, especially ones like this, things can be a little bit harsh. So what they would do is they'd actually sort of tame that. They'd roll it out, create a little bit more warmth. And that's certainly evident here, where she sounds a little bit, underwater, a little bit. It's still a very good sounding record, but it's not, you put it on and you just recognize how beautiful the music is. It's not like, oh my God, this is an amazing sounding thing immediately. It's just good, and it's good for the time. When Rhino actually did a bunch of their releases, this is sort of earlier on, when just before, obviously pre-COVID, so it's right at that sort of time when some companies like Rhino were taking seriously the vinyl resurgence and trying to do what they could do and get good pressings and stuff like that. So this is, the cover is actually quite well done, the reproduction of all of this. And the record itself is pressed on decent quality vinyl. It is, if you look in the dead wax, see if I can actually see here without too much drama. So looking at the dead wax here, I can see the Kevin Gray mark here. This is one of the Kevin Gray pressings. I see KG on here. And this is, you know, everybody loves Kevin Gray and did a very, very good job on this. There was a similar release not that long ago that was the same barcode. And there was some debate about whether it was the same pressing, etc. But yeah, this is an interesting listen. Substantially more clear than the original, that is certain. You definitely get her voice much more sort of focused. The instrumentation is still there, but there's a real thumpiness. Like the bass drum in California is like really hitting hard, almost too much, I think. It takes away some of the subtlety of the performance, I think. And look, the rest of this album is actually very, very good, but I think in particular, if we're comparing just California to California, I think this one is actually a little bit much. I think that it takes the bottom end and it pushes it over where it actually needs to be on my system. Recently, there was a box set. Bernie Grumman did all the remasters. That's what this one looks like. You see, it's probably hard to see, but it's actually not that hard to see. This is a much lighter blue, a sort of indigo-y one. We talked about this when I opened up the box set. But yeah, this Grumman version, very, very different. It's actually interesting to hear back to back. This, again, much less deep boominess. The vocals, again, are much more centrally focused. There's a slight sort of tanginess to her upper register, for lack of a better word. It's very, very good. And when I was doing this, I actually ended up preferring the Grumman to this, but, you know, particularly on that track, it still felt that the things were a little bit sort of two-dimensional, for lack of a better word. Things were sort of sitting in space, just one thing. You know, Joni was there, but all the other instruments were sort of right beside her, and there wasn't a lot of sort of give and take there. Which brings us to this guy, which is, again, mastered from the original tapes, supposedly, then put in through a DSD process to capture it, then that raw DSD file, without any equalization or normalization or any other effects works from the digital, it's just used as a playback file to actually do whatever analog nonsense that they do through their mastering chain. And we get this version. And this version, for me, on first listen, is definitive. It has all of the aspects, this sort of, a little bit of the warmth and evocativeness of the first pressing. It has more of the thump than this guy and less than this guy. It's the right Goldilocks version of when that bass drum's sort of kicking in, and even the sense of percussiveness with the stringed instruments, when you actually feel the plucking, the strumming of the auto harps, all these elements coming together, it just does what you want to do. And her voice on this track and throughout just feels like she's right there, and allows the other instrumentation to really be located in space. Now, some people might find that not to their satisfaction. I think that some of the tracks, for example, when she's just strumming guitar and this guitar is slightly to the right, you sort of feel the absence of the stuff on the left, if that makes any sense. Because her voice is like right here. The imaging is incredible. You know Joni, you hear every breath, you hear every articulation, it's all there. And it allows the instruments to really very much be in space, either right where she's at, or you can feel it, again, sort of move behind her as the mix allows. So for something like California, which has these highs and lows, these different collisions of different instrumentation in terms of the timbre placement, This, I think, gets everything for me right. It really opens up the song and makes the song much more inviting than I've ever heard it. And for me, if this was, great but a little bit thumpy, and this had the clarity and a little bit less of the obnoxiousness, but is a little bit muted, and this had the original sort of grit and determination, but didn't do a presentation sort of worthy of modern systems. Really, this for me seems to do the trick. It's I have them all. I will be able to go back and forth. Other people are going to perhaps think differently, think maybe this is too analytical or something like that, that the way that the instrumentations are in a position is too off-putting compared to the sound they have in their head. I don't know what to say. I did very quickly throw on the high definition tracks. And again, they're very, very well done. I think the digital mastering, which again is not the same as this, these are the digital files that are available, again has a cleanliness which is fantastic, but this fits that sort of middle ground in all fronts. It has the clarity. You can pick out everything, but it still feels warm and inviting. It still feels that I'm getting what I want out of this record, which is something incredibly intimate, incredibly musical, and something that just draws you in. And the more you listen, the more you want to hear, the more you want to explore, the more you just want to go back and listen to one song and just follow one instrument as it does its stuff. Just focus directly on her playing rather than the lyrics or the nature of her voice. I will also say that at times on some of these other records, when she does hit those high notes, it is a little hard. It's a little, buzzy. Shrill is too unfair a word in some ways, but it is that sort of level of discomfort. Whereas the original doesn't do it because it rolls it off quite significantly. And this manages to ride that wave, so that when she is going up high, you hear her up high, but you're not getting all the over harmonics that are actually causing something that sounds like distortion or something that sounds sort of tense on your ear, especially if you're listening on volume. So for me, at this moment, on this day, after doing this thing, and yeah, I just bought it, so I hope I like it. But honestly, this really actually pleases me very, very much. The one step for me feels like the version to own. It is limited edition. It is very expensive, but I'm extremely pleased to have it. It is very interesting for me actually to go back and forth. These are probably the two I would spend the most time going back and forth with. I think what Grumman did with this is very, very, very close to the original, just in a better presentation. And I think this is doing what the intention of the original was and elevating a bit. And we've seen that a lot now with the one steps, of them not being afraid to be so purist about what it's reproducing, to make it a one-to-one copy of what came before, but to elevate what was there in the mix, but not do so in such a detrimental way. Certainly Mofi has a long history of just doing smiley face EQs and stuff like that. That's not what's going on here. I think what is going on is that it is playing to what this is meant to do, that this is not background music. This is like serious, you're sitting down and listening to music. And this, we talk about veils being lifted, we talk about all this stuff, but this for me is one of those records that just opens up with this presentation, and I'm extremely, extremely pleased to add it to my collection. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, follow us on social media. Let me know what you think of these. And yeah, we will see you next video. All the best. Take care.